I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but sometimes I feel like budget meals feel like budget meals, if you know what I'm saying. Like, it feels like a cheap meal that you put together and it doesn't always taste great, or it just feels like weird. And so I wanted to put together a video of budget meals that actually taste good, that don't feel like you're eating on a budget, and that are a little bit different than what you might see on Pinterest normally. So we are going to start off by making some bone broth. Now, if you don't know how to make bone broth, I have an entire video on it, but I'm going to give you like a little crash course here. So I got a chicken from Costco, and just as like a little budget tip, it's actually cheaper at Walmart. I didn't realize that when I bought it at Costco. I was not paying attention enough to the price, and Walmart's actually a little bit cheaper. And so I'm going to put a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, garlic in here, and I'm going to put it on pressure cooking, and it's about to be like 40 minutes or so, and I'm going to let that cook. And then in the meantime, I'm going to get some sweet potatoes together. So we are going to make some sweet potato gnocchi. Now, it sounds more complicated than it is, I promise. It's really not that hard. I was a little intimidated when I first started, but it's really not that bad. So you want to stab your sweet potatoes a little bit, just so that they don't explode in the oven. I've never had this happen, and I honestly don't always stab them, but I figured for this video, let's be safe than sorry. So throw it in the oven at 450, and you want to cook it for about an hour or so. It's going to depend on how big your sweet potatoes are. Circling back to the chicken, it is done, and we're going to pull it out a little bit later, but we're going to let it cool off so that we can pick it. Now, at this point, our sweet potatoes have cooled a bit. You can definitely do this when it's hot, but it's going to be hard because I've done it before and they burn when they're really hot, obviously. So you want to de-skin all of the sweet potatoes, and just pick out any parts that might look a little funky or whatever, but put them all into the bowl, and then you're going to take a fork and mash them all up, and you want to get it into like a really smooth paste type of texture. And then you're going to want to grab flour. Now, there's no like exact measurement here on how much flour to add, but just for reference, I added about like 2.5 cups or so, and I had like maybe about 4 pounds of sweet potatoes there. So you really just want to like mix it until it is like a dough like texture. And I ended up switching from a fork here to a spatula because it started to get a little bit difficult to mix. So I added a little bit more flour, and you just, again, you want to make it into like a dough type of mixture, and you'll really figure it out the more you work with this, like what your texture wants to be. But you're just going to want to roll it out onto a surface and put some flour on there because it's still going to be sticky at this point, and just kind of knead it like a dough. It's not going to be like, if you've ever worked with bread dough, it's not going to come together like a bread dough exactly. But you just want it to be like together enough so that you can work with it. It's not too sticky. And then I usually just like let it rest for like, if I have time, about 30 minutes. I don't always if I'm making this for a quick weeknight meal and I haven't prepped this ahead of time. So if you have time, let it rest. You'll let like the gluten kind of do its magic. If not, just kind of keep working, and you want to cut this off in sections. Now, of course, I had put my dough cutter in the dishwasher at this point. It's always, I feel like I always am putting the tools I need in the dishwasher right before I cook. So anyways, you can cut it with anything. I cut it with a knife here, and you want to roll it out, and you want to roll it into like a really thin kind of snake like shape there, and you're just gonna cut it. You can cut a knife, or if you have like a bench scraper, you can use that. It works a little bit better. And you just want to make them into small like gnocchi size pieces. Now, I actually even recommend making them just a tad smaller than I did here. I always forget that they expand, so don't forget that. They're going to get a little bit bigger in the water when you cook them, just like a noodle will if you've made homemade noodles. And if you're feeling extra fancy, you can make like a nice little design with the fork. I rarely do that because I have 2 kids under 2, and I'm not trying to be that fancy. I want to make homemade scratch meals, but they don't care. They don't care if it looks fancy or not. But just like from a culinary perspective, if you have like that texture on the gnocchi, it's supposed to hold sauce better. I don't know. It all ends up in the same place in the end. So you're just going to cook these for a couple minutes. Once they start to float on top, that's when you know they are ready to take out. And I just put them into another bowl. and wait until I'm ready to make the sauce. So if you're making a lot like I did, you're just going to want to transfer it into a bowl. You can always like try to make the sauce ahead of time and then transfer it over, but sometimes I just find it's like really hard. And at this point, our chicken has cooled off enough. It's still a little bit hot here. But we're going to pick apart some of the chicken so that we can put it into our gnocchi dish. And later on, we'll pick apart the rest of it to kind of make our bone broth. But this is just kind of step one here. But we're going to use this chicken for all of our meals this week for the 3 meals that we're going to make. And this chicken, I think, cost me, I know it's like $1 a pound at Walmart, and this was about a 5-pound chicken. So if you got it at Walmart, it'd be like $5 or $6. This one probably cost me about $7. I think it was $1.50 a pound at Costco. So now we have all of our cooked chicken, and we have butter in the pan, and a little bit of garlic too, and we're just gonna like pan fry it a little bit, and that gets like a nice little sear on it. It gives a little bit of texture, and then we're gonna put some sage in there, and you want to mix it around, get that sage flavor. And at Walmart you can get this for $1.99, the sage, like fresh organic sage. And it really just gives it a really nice, like fancy feeling flavor. It's a little bit different than you might usually make. And then I serve it up, and you know what? My toddler loves this. He loves noodles, and this is basically like noodles to him. And he will eat this, and it makes me feel good because it's veggies in there, and I can sometimes get him to eat a protein, but you know, every day is different, right, with a toddler. So we're going to pick that chicken apart, and we're going to put those bones back in that Instapot. And then I'll show you what we're going to do with it later, but we're just going to pick it apart. You don't have to be any, like, do it like anything fancy, shredded or anything like that. I'm just taking the chicken off, and we're going to put it in a bag to use later throughout the week. And we're going to chop it up or, pick it apart differently depending on what we are going to make it with. And again, make sure you're setting aside those bones so that you can put it back in the Instapot so we can make that bone broth. And I put a little bit of chicken feet in there too. This is totally optional, but I get those from Walmart. They're like $6 for like a whole package, and that will last a really long time. Now, I keep my veggies frozen, like my little scraps, in my freezer, and that really helps make bone broth cheap. And then I put a little bit of apple cider vinegar, which helps to extract all of the good minerals from the bones. And then when I'm done, you guys, this is the best hack ever, is to put it into little muffin tins. And that way you have little pucks to use later on. Because sometimes, like, I just don't have time to pressure can or anything to make it shelf stable. And I don't always go through it quick enough in my fridge, and then it goes bad. So this is like the perfect happy medium for me, as I just freeze in little pucks. I take it out, throw it into a freezer bag, and it's perfect. So next meal we're going to make is going to be like I don't even like have a total word for like name for it, but it's kind of like an enchilada tortilla bake. And I always try to use fresh shredded cheese when I am making anything melted with cheese. You guys, it's going to melt so much better. It's not going to have all of those like anti-caking agents on it. And then we're going to go ahead and throw a whole stick of butter into a hot pan, and then we're going to make a roux. So you want to use equal parts flour to equal parts butter, and then you just want to dump that in there, take a whisk, and you're going to stir it up, and it's going to make like a thick kind of paste type texture. And then when you add the liquid, it's going to start to thicken up the liquid. So here we're going to use that bone broth that we made. I had froze it, or actually no, sorry, this one I had left over from when we made it. And this is about 2 cups that I'm going to put in here. This is about a cup, and then you're going to see it thicken up, and that's what the roux is going to do. It's going to make like a nice thick liquid. And then I'm going to put the other remaining cup in there, and I end up putting a little bit of milk in here later, you'll see, but you can either, if you want to skip the milk, you can just put more bone broth. And then we're going to add in the cheese, and here we're making like the cheese sauce for the tortilla bake. And you guys, this cheese sauce is so good. It's so flavorful. The bone broth just adds like this really good depth to it. And it just, I don't know, it's like one of the better cheese sauces I've made. And if you've watched my enchilada video, I might go back and kind of update my cheese sauce and add bone broth because it is really good. So here you can kind of like choose your own adventure with flavorings, depending on what you have in your pantry. Like if you have different seasonings or you don't want to spend the money on other ones, just make sure you pick one that has like a really good pow. So I use salt, pepper, paprika, Garlic, I recommend not skipping the garlic. The paprika is really good, but if you only have like a budget for a certain amount of spices and you don't have a lot in your pantry, I would definitely opt for the garlic and the taco seasoning. Like that's what's gonna have a really good kind of bang for your buck in this sauce. But if you have, different seasonings, go ahead and try different stuff in here. There's really no like rules here. It's a budget meal, right? So you're using what you have on hand. And here I have some tortillas that I made earlier in the week. These are corn tortillas. They're super easy to make. All it is corn flour and water, and you just make it into a tortilla shape and you fry it. So if you haven't tried that, definitely give it a try. Otherwise, you can obviously buy a store-bought. It's going to cost a little bit more. And then we're going to put a layer of cheese onto this. And by the way, I'm putting this in a cast iron pan. I love baking with cast iron pans. Like the cleanup is just so much easier than anything else. And now we're going to start to put our chicken in there that we picked apart the day before. And I'm layering this is going to be a few layers. So you might see there's not a lot of chicken. But that's because there's going to be multiple layers and I don't want it to be overloaded with chicken. Now these are beans I made earlier in the week. I just put them in my Instapot and I cooked them. If you do the baked beans, it's much cheaper. Obviously, again, you can use a can, but you're going to pay a little bit more. It depends what you have in your budget and what you have in your time. And now we're going to put another layer of cheese sauce, and this is going to be covering all on the top. And we're going to put it into an oven at 350 for about 20 minutes or so. If your ingredients are more cold, then you might want to put it in a bit longer. But you can see that the cheese kind of crispy on the top. It was so good. And you can see the layers here. Now, if you have multiple tortillas or different ingredients in there, because again, this is a budget meal, you guys. Use what you have on hand. Clean out your fridge. If you've got beans or corn, other veggies, just throw it into here. There's no really rules here, but this is just to kind of give you an idea. And if you want to follow the recipe exactly, I'll throw it in the description below, but there's no rules. Okay, next and final meal, we're gonna make a different kind of take on fried rice. Now, I used to always think that cleaning your rice or kind of removing the starch was just a bougie added step, you guys, but no, it is really worth it to do it if you can and you have the time. Now, you're going to add bone broth when you're cooking the rice. This is going to be key to adding a lot of flavor, so don't forget to do that. And then we're going to chop up some carrots, and I like to make them into kind of nice little square sized pieces so that they cook all nicely and it's just kind of an even bite with the rice. And again, like I said before, use what veggies you have on hand. I think peas would go really good on this. Really, any veggies you have, I would just dice them up a little bit small so that the texture is kind of consistent in the rice. And we're also going to chop up half of an onion. I always like to make this diced, and I love cutting kind of horizontally on the onion and then switching and cutting up and down vertically. And you want to make sure that you're not cutting the end of the onion when you cut the vertical slices, and is what makes a really nice chopped cubed onion without it falling all over the place. And again, we gotta stop and rock the baby here because that's just 2 under 2 life. Okay, so your butter has been frying in the pan. We'll put a whole stick in there because we're not shy on butter here. And we're going to pat it down and try and get a nice little fry on it. Don't be shy on letting it fry for a while. I would put it on medium high heat. It'll really just depend on your stove on how hot it gets, but you want to get a nice little crisp on it. That's going to make the really good flavor there. Now we're going to use the leftovers of that sage that we bought. So again, we want to make sure we're using all of the stuff that we bought. If we're going to buy a little bit more of a spendy item, we want to really make that go and last long. Now I'm going to put some garlic powder in here. I had a garlic clove and we would have bought one right for the first meal here. So if you have it and you want to cut it up, chop up some fresh garlic in here, but put it in at the end so it doesn't fry. And then you're going to want to put in a couple eggs. I put in 4 here. I like a heavier egg fried rice. And you just want to stir it up in there and kind of get it mixed in. And then we're also going to want to start to chop up our chicken. And so I just kind of put it all in a pile here. This was probably about half of the rotisserie chicken here. And I just chopped it up and I threw it into the pan and I mixed everything up. And you guys, this was really, really good. That sage added such a unique flavor. And my husband was like, I like this better than our regular fried rice. And I really just came up with this because I was gonna make regular fried rice, but I forgot we don't have soy sauce. I forgot to pick some up from the store. And my husband doesn't really like soy sauce, so this was actually a win-win for us. And I really hope that this gave you some really good ideas on what you can do on some budget meals. And if you have your favorite budget meals, please drop them in the comments below, because sharing is caring and we all could learn on some new budget meals as well. So I hope you guys have a great day. And if you found this helpful, don't forget to share with your friends and subscribe for additional videos.